Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Salmaan Jaffery, and this is my colleague Miguel. We're gonna, I guess, embark on a discussion on AI, covering a couple of areas. And maybe what we do is we start with Miguel. We're both kind of veterans in this space, taking stock of, in financial services, how things are different today generally than they were maybe 15, 20, 25 years ago, I suspect, when we started our respective careers.
Yeah.
How about we start there?
Yeah, let's start there. Hope everybody can listen. I think there is a fundamental shift that happened, which is technology, of course, was always there in financial services. You know, the first computers were used actually primarily the first time by banks, actually, and of course. But that accelerated in the last decades, and in the last 20 years, I think there has been a fundamental shift in terms of how you manage and run a bank, where actually technology is really at the core of what you're doing. There is a fundamental understanding currently from the board of Emirates NBD, from the management, the top management of Emirates NBD, the CEO Shane Nelson, that we are actually at the core a technology company. So we were used to managing technology as a supporting function, heavily reliant on external partners and vendors, technology coming into the bank, but actually not understood as your core business. Currently, that is not the fact. You actually have to master technology, you have to have the talent, you have to have the capabilities, you have to be in charge of your destiny. And that is especially true in a bank like Emirates NBD currently.
Let me build on what Miguel said, because in my capacity as running the client book for the DIFC, I have maybe two perspectives. One is exactly what Miguel said, which is as an organization, whether it's a large bank or a financial center, we obviously have an obligation to digitize our operations and to be able to provide the best front-end user experience, and we'll get into some of those details. So in that regard, I think Emirates NBD and ourselves share that commitment. We'll talk about use cases for AI and for digital. But I also want to build on something that Miguel said, is that we are here today talking about transformation and AI because a lot of amazing groundwork, necessary groundwork has been done for the last 20, 25 years, particularly with institutions like Emirates NBD and to an extent the DIFC. A necessary condition for today's conversation on AI analytics rests upon the digital transformations that each of us has experienced in our multiple facets in our careers as consultants and as bankers. And I think it's important to make that claim. And one last thing I'll say before we get into some of the details. We should also define terms as we talk about AI, because obviously it's being used quite generally. I would submit to you that the machine learning phase of AI I think we've been living it for quite some time now, perhaps unconsciously, whether it's social media or e-commerce. But let me pause there and maybe pass it back to you, Miguel.
Yeah, I'll add to that. So especially in Emirates NBD, the Emirates NBD has always been an innovative bank here in the region. But about 6, 7 years ago, it actually wanted to take, the mastery of technology, the innovation further, and it understood that it had to do a massive technology transformation. And it's not just about, the infrastructure or the applications. It's a holistic transformation that you need to do. So in 2016-17, the bank actually embarked in transforming its IT platform as a prerequisite for innovation, speed to market, for actually being able to leverage a lot of the things that are coming up now as AI and other. And so, and as you know, in banking and in anywhere, so it's not about one silver bullet. It had to be a profound transformation from how you run your infrastructure. So how do you align yourself with best practice on cloud native infrastructure? How do you re-architect your applications? How do you, organize yourself and blend with business? And how do you organize the teams to bring agility and delivery and fast delivery to the business? So that was done over the last 3-4 years. I'll give you some So that was a huge investment that was done, almost $600 million invested in that technology transformation. But there was this understanding that the legacy technology that was there was hindering you and preventing you from moving fast and developing fast and delivering fast to the business. So that was done over the last 3-4 years with huge impact. We are 100% running on a cloud-native infrastructure. We have looked very closely at what systems, what applications do we buy, which ones we will build. We work with partners, we work with our teams internally to make sure that infrastructure can run cloud natively and in our private cloud, in public cloud as well. We reorganized teams, so we were extremely leveraged on vendors. We had to in-source talent to manage and be in charge of our destiny. So we currently have 2,000 engineers working here out of Dubai, organized in squads and tribes and delivering to the business in a blended way with product owners from the business working side by side with the technology people. That was achieved in the last few years, and actually that laid the foundation for much of the innovation that we are able to do currently, including in AI as well.
So let me complement Miguel's description of their journey, and we will get to all your fun questions about AI as well, but I think the context setting is very important. So you might look at Emirates NBD and you might look at the DIFC and you might say, well, Emirates NBD is this very large, innovative, tech-focused institution. And even though we are not a bank, it's important to understand the context that the DIFC plays. So we have over 4,400 clients of our own. These are all institutions. But the underlying client base of those clients exceeds 37,000 people. So the amount of data that the authority encounters on an annual basis, both from the time at which clients are onboarded to they're managed, and this excludes, by the way, all of the good work that our regulator, the DFSA, does, and their data obviously is highly proprietary and confidential in nature because they're regulators. So the story I want to tell you quickly is, naturally we've always had a digital process, as it were. But if I'm honest with you, about 3.5 years ago, it was significant. There was still a lot of paper in it. And one of the things that we did right before COVID was we completely digitized through kind of virtually near STP processing our onboarding process. And I can tell you that for the 6 to 9 months that there was very significant or very limited mobility in terms of work during COVID, our business was completely uninterrupted. We managed to onboard seamlessly and digitally all of our clients. So the point here is to give you a sense that before we get into what you do with data, whether it's analytics or AI, it's important to highlight the journey that institutions have taken to transform and to become much more digital in nature. And the AI and the analytics layer builds on top of that.
Just building on that. So where are we bringing in AI, and why was this transformation required for that? So there's a big focus in the bank on leveraging and putting all our servicing and sourcing on digital channels, ideally self-served, but also in assisted way as well. So you've probably seen our results recently. So this is a very, very efficient bank, 25%, 26% cost to income, 25% ROE, so a big bank that's been growing hugely. It's not been growing because we've been expanding branches or expanding sales force. It has been growing through digital means. And to achieve that, you have to be obsessed about putting servicing, putting sourcing in your channels, in your mobile app, in your online channels, be it corporate, be it for individuals. And while doing that, when you want to build an end-to-end journey for onboarding credit cards, for example, you want to completely onboard without any human touching the process of a customer in their mobile app or a customer in front of their relationship manager, be able to onboard very quickly a credit card, completely STP, and start using it immediately on their Apple Wallet. You really have to overcome a number of challenges, and those challenges are from the moment you do KYC on the customer, from the moment you underwrite the credit for the customer. So all those things typically, banks relied on human decisioning. And we're doing inroads on statistical-based scoring and some of that stuff, but still a lot would fall into a human process. So you cannot provide that experience of a complete STP approval of a credit card. To reach there, you need to bring in other ways of taking those decisions. And where statistics, hit their limits, then you bring in machine learning and other types of models. And believe me, throughout the journey, it's not just KYC and then it's fraud, it's compliance, it's the risk underwriting. In a process like this, there are more than 40 touch points on individual decisions that had to be orchestrated and built upon using AI. And just to share with you some impact of this, Emirates NBD was sourcing in January 2022. It was sourcing about 55,000 credit cards a month. So that amount almost doubled in 1 year, given that these tools were there and the customers could do self-service sourcing, or they could do assisted sourcing without any intervention from back offices.
Hey, Salim, how are you?
Doing good. Sorry, everyone. I've been here for like an hour circling around, so I apologies for my delay. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to jump in. I mean, we've discussed this, previously, and I'm curious, where are we right now in terms of preparation for the AI tools that you're discussing? Yeah. What are the foundational steps that are needed to be able to incorporate these AI tools that we're talking about today?
Yeah, so that's a nice segue. We spent the first few minutes kind of talking about the journeys that our institutions have had, which is to lay the foundations for the analytics and AI on top of it. So let me just answer the question by saying, I told you already about the scale and scope of our businesses, right? You know about Emirates NBD, and I told you about the 37,000 people that work at the DIFC. As Miguel said, one of the things that starts to push the agenda for what you want to do with your data, whether it's analytics or the overlay of AI, is the pressure of scale, right? Economic performance, financial performance, but at the same time, operational efficiency and user experience being really impeccable. And it's a lot harder than you think it is. There's a lot of work that institutions try and do to make sure to produce the financial results that Miguel talked about. I mean, that CI ratio is probably amongst the best in the world, right?
One of the best, yeah. 27%.
Yeah. To get that and to have a seamless client experience, it takes a lot of work. And I think this is maybe the pivot for the rest of the conversation on AI. Before we do that, I just want to make one other observation, which is important to define terms. A lot of, AI is now on everyone's tongue because of ChatGPT. But if you take the journey of what you generically call AI, I mean, machine learning or algorithms have been part of IT departments or operations for quite some time. And unconsciously, I forget, each of you, any one of you who's in social media or who has made an e-commerce purchase or any kind of recommendation that, whether you noticed it or not, falls in your mobile phone or your computer is the result of machine learning. So I think what we're talking about now is a movement from that into generative AI, which is this kind of uncanny ability of these algorithms to scan large data sets and produce insights that, frankly, Miguel, I think are catching people off guard. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. A lot of these decisions, if you really want to provide a fantastic user experience on sourcing, on servicing, no humans touching the process end to end, you actually have to automate that decisioning. And to automate that decisioning beyond the basic percentage you can achieve with the traditional models and statistical models, you have to go beyond that. At Emirates NBD, I'm linking that to the foundational transformation that had to be there. One of the key investments that was done was on setting up one of the biggest, actually, big data clusters in the region, run, I think, the largest cloud data cluster in the region currently. We ingest daily about 30 million data points from our customers, from multiple transactions and from multiple interactions they have with the bank. And of course, that then gives you the basis on what you can leverage then for whatever models you think you want to build. But that is just one half of the equation. The other half is, okay, do you have the talent, do you have the team, do you have the organization in place to leverage that? And that is, I believe, one of the most difficult things to do. So over the last 3 years, we built an internal center of excellence on data and analytics. We had to bring in talent, data scientists, data engineers that understood how to leverage these tools, and to very closely with the business leaders and the leadership of the bank prioritize on what are the models that actually can add value in a substantial way that moves the needle on the P&L of the bank. Prioritize those and then focus on those. And at the same time, and this links to fintech and to the external world as well, which is what are the models where you should not be developing yourself, but we actually should be buying from a third party, because they can actually be sourced externally without you having to develop from scratch. So this has been our journey. So far, we currently have 100 data scientists and data engineers working on that in a squad operating model, working on those models. We have more than 25 models being developed in parallel to different use cases across the bank. And currently, this is where we are.
And that's actually leading on to the next point that I wanted to ask about. And I'm curious, because we're very lucky to be speaking to the decision makers in this field to really understand, what does it take right now to get to this point? Are there any obstacles that you face, whether in terms of mindset, education, is it system infrastructure? Where do you see that?
Yeah, look, our approach is pretty consistent with the approach that the UAE has taken. So the UAE, by the way, for those who don't know, the UAE, I'm almost certain, was the first country in the world to establish a ministry for AI back in 2017. And the core strategy is twofold. One is to use AI across government, and number two is to develop an indigenous kind of capability. Now, the DIFC, I told you about kind of the scale and breadth of our business. One of the things that we've done to support that strategy, and actually I forgot about the fact that we have over 40 or 41 AI companies in the DIFC today. And in fact, almost 3 years ago, we established a separate license category because we wanted to support the strategy of the government, right? So the first thing that we've kind of helped us become more familiar with the space, because we're not data scientists, of course, is the idea of enabling others who are specialists in their field to do so. A couple of examples there, and these refer to use cases that I think are very relevant to Emirates NBD and to DIFC. Two of those 40 companies that come to mind. One is a company called Theta Ray, which does a lot of very, very interesting compliance and KYC type of scoring using AI. They have 19 patents. They're a DIFC company. There's another company called Quantexa. They are a $1.8 billion unicorn, also a DIFC company, just its Series E of $140 million. And they are using AI for data and analytics. So the answer is, our role, right, has been to become much more comfortable with this enabling technology by allowing experts to come into the market and to use it and deploy from the DIFC. One other quick thing to Miguel's point about models. We're in the business of registering companies, so we have to take risk management very seriously. So one of the things that we're looking at today is we obviously have models that score risk before we decide on which companies to onboard. We are looking at many technologies to allow us to be smarter in how we do it. So
amazing, and that really speaks, creating the infrastructure, the policies, the regulation, to the environment, the ecosystem, to be able to demonstrate these technologies. And can you tell us, Miguel, a bit about how you're actually doing that, or from your side as well?
So from within a large bank like Emirates NBD, so that there are many challenges to be overcome. There are the technology challenges. So how do you have an architecture in place that can actually ingest these huge amounts of data from within the bank, from external to the bank, and of course be able to provide a platform for teams to leverage that data, to explore, to investigate, to develop models and train models. That is one angle and it is something that it's not easy to do. These are quite new technologies, managing these large clusters, integrating them with our operational systems, making sure that you have consistency of the data, that you actually have a way to share that data within the organization to the teams that actually is not fragmented. It's actually they can leverage that cluster. That's one difficult part to it. The other part is there is a premium currently for talent in these areas. So how do you attract, data scientists, data engineers that have experience in leveraging these tools, and actually convince them that working for Emirates NBD is a place where they should work. There's interesting stuff to do. There's impact to be created. That's a difficult part as well. I would add to that there is then internally, how do you move the whole organization to leverage this, correct? You had in banks traditionally pockets of teams doing some analytics. They're using the traditional SAS or other tools to do linear regression and underwriting based on linear regression and so on. How do you move these teams to embrace this center of excellence that was created? And then other areas in the bank that were not using this kind of analytics and advanced analytics tools like compliance, like operational risk, like operations and so on. How do you move them to have an analytics mindset and instead of putting a human trying to take these decisions, understand that this can be codified, this can be in some way put into an AI model that can actually produce a good outcome, a good decision, while them having control of that. Those are the challenges.
Exactly.
I think there's a regulatory angle to this as well. So which is okay, but I believe that here in the UAE we are in a special place because there's quite some openness for us to explore with that. Correct. As long as we can articulate how we develop the model, how the model is performing, how do we calibrate it. There's quite openness from the regulators for us to use those models.
That's exactly what I wanted to allude to next, where, for example, with AI tools, they're automating a lot of roles. So what happens when something that is usually done by a person gets automated? What happens, to the people working there? Is there a culture around this? And for example, also with the decision makers, with shareholders, how do you show them the potential of this? Because anytime we talk about the future of fintech, we're talking about things 5, 6, 7 years ahead at least. How do you really communicate that? Because I think that's such an important step in your role to really have to communicate that vision to the people doing this.
Our challenge is a good one, which is more of growth. How do we enable growth without having to grow your staff, correct? So whenever you want to grow and source more accounts, more credit cards, more personal loans and so on, how do you do that without having to have a battalion of people and growing your back offices? That is what drives us, because there's not so much a challenge of, everybody's going to lose their job. We cannot have a situation where we are pushing growth, and that can only come with people coming in. And then later on, if you have a downturn or a stagnation of growth, then you have to send people away. That is something that is very clear in the head of our CEO, that he really wants to enable growth without human intervention, so that we can actually scale down and up in a much more flexible way.
Definitely.
Yeah, a question that our CEO and the management team spent a lot of time on. My colleague Chris Coons, who runs strategies here, we spent a lot of time thinking about this question, which is part of our DNA, which is to drive economic growth, both within the center and for Dubai. And so the question of how you do that, I think, has significant relevance for AI. I completely concur. Where we land on this is that it is not about curtailing job growth. It is about being able to scale in a manner that's not necessarily linear when it comes to headcount. So you can get the J curve of growth without necessarily having to incur the headcount cost. It's not about headcount reduction. That's number one. The other thing is, we're looking at use cases that drive productivity both within the DIFC for our community and by extension in Dubai and the UAE. And I think that's a really important place maybe that we can spend some time on, because ultimately AI should be viewed by this economy as a source of differentiation, a competitive advantage. We are not the size of the US, we're not the size of the EU, right? What we do have is a very sharp and ambitious vision to use knowledge to drive economic growth. And I think if we get that right, I mean, I'll give you an example. Some of the use cases we're looking at internally come directly from the Ministry of AI, which has put together this guide of 100, very, very interesting use cases for generative AI and some other use cases which revolve around, which range from things as simple as putting together a presentation, updating, your data tables, client service responses. So it's a thing that we spend a lot of time on, because don't forget, it's not just about the DIFC as an entity, but it's also the community and the ecosystem that we support. So I think it's a super question.
No, exactly, and that's actually where I was going next, where compared globally, I mean, you mentioned, we have a Ministry of AI, there's even a Ministry of Finance in the metaverse, really forward-thinking type policies and mindsets when it comes to this. So, I mean, are there other aspects that really, even though others, maybe global systems have been around for longer, are there things that are based here that are more advantageous in comparison that you think the region can utilize?
So so if you look from a bank's perspective, there are certain assets that you cannot build yourself. For example, if you want to have a common KYC platform, for example, you want to onboard very easily and you want to, given customer consent, you want to access the data from this customer. You find here that type of infrastructure here in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia as well, which is much more advanced than you can find in Europe. So onboarding processes, for example, to banks, to current accounts in banks in Europe, they lag typically, especially the direct onboarding, because there is not, this common infrastructure does not exist. And you see this coming, time and time. So common KYC infrastructure, so ID infrastructure for residents and citizens of the UAE, that exists currently. The same is being set up for corporates, so for businesses, so where you can actually, through blockchain and the government blockchain, you can access the information about corporates very easily when they onboard. And beyond that, so many other platforms that actually have to be developed and catered to by the country, not necessarily by an individual bank. You can find them here in a much more advanced state than you find in the US or in Europe.
I see what you mean. Once all that's connected, it's easier to adopt those things and implement those technologies. And as we're nearing towards the end, the main topics in the news at the moment are things like the metaverse, like ChatGPT. A lot of these things are still nascent in implementation. You have companies like DIWA saying that they want to implement in their offerings. Where do you see this in the world of finance? Because always when it comes from finance to health, those are always very high security type industries. And how soon, for example, do you see the implementation of these types of technologies in your line of work?
Yeah, look, the answer to all these questions are, it depends. It depends on the use case. Look, I think, as Miguel mentioned, the demographics, the ambition, and the top-down nature of this government's commitment to digitization gives us a lot of significant advantages, right, to leverage AI and digital capabilities for our advancement. We are going to be using lots of use cases, but I think we also have to take a step back and think through how we use this very carefully. In the case of the DIFC, as I'm sure this is the case with ENBD, data privacy is very important. How do you manage we are, in different ways, custodians for data for a lot of different individuals and corporations. What are the rules of engagement around that, right? Secondly, how do you use AI in a manner that advances the economic causes that you're trying to do without exacerbating inequality? Do people have access to it, right? Look, I think in the short run, the low-hanging fruit, as it were, which is essentially a super smart version of a search engine that can eliminate unnecessary repetitive tasks. I mean, things like that I think are no-brainers, but I think a fair amount of work will need to be done before we agree on the wholesale use of public information and client information. And obviously, as financial institutions, we're going to be taking our guidance from the regulators on that.
Just adding to that, and specifically on generative models, GPT-type models. So in the bank, we've been working on let's call it traditional AI, machine learning based AI for some time already. So this is generative models is quite a new innovation that happened in the last 5-6 months. Still, so we're doing experiments in the bank. I would say there are two different realities. One where we have proven already that it can be used and scaled, and we've scaled it, which is these tools that help productivity of developers. So you know that these models have been trained to actually, on code, they can actually assist your developers in being more productive while developing. We started in January with a team of about 40 people using it. Right now, all the specific developers, about 1,200 developers are using it, using Microsoft Copilot, and they are using it on the day-to-day in their tasks. That is, let's say, where it has been proven and where we can leverage it, and actually you can see the benefits, actually, the productivity increases. On core use cases in banking, we have still not seen the killer use cases. We have not seen the killer use case. We're trying a different approach there, which is, okay, let's work with our compliance teams, let's work with our fraud teams, let's work with our operations teams, sales teams. Let them come up with the use cases that they believe where this can be used. And we've done some hackathons internally. We've found some pockets of opportunity, but we are still testing now. I think the data issue can be overcome. So we are working with the likes of Microsoft and others to make sure that while we use this on their public cloud, that the data that we actually, it's resident in the UE, and that actually they are not persisting this data. So the data issue can be solved. The problem is what are the killer use cases in banking that actually are gonna make the difference beyond development and coding, right?
Definitely. And I think that's a great place to end because, as we know, the region has some of the highest in online penetration. The demand is high for these types of technologies to be implemented, but it's key to do it right. And if it's not done properly, it's going to create more problems than solutions. So, first of all, thank you both for being here. This is a great conversation.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's the one that definitely keeps on going. Thank you, everyone.